There's lots going on in Europe at the moment, not least in Ireland, which goes to the polls on Thursday to elect a new president. Although it's largely a ceremonial role, it gives us a chance to gauge the support for the Euro project in one of the countries hit hardest by austerity measures. The polls pointed to businessman and TV star Sean Gallagher as the likely winner of the election, despite being closely linked to the Fianna Fáil party, who are at the helm during the country's disastrous economic downturn. Then came allegations he took money from a fuel smuggler, turning everything on its head. Jon Tonge is a professor of politics at the University of Liverpool and follows Irish politics closely. Professor, how do you win an election during such difficult times? Are there signs of an anti-Euro agenda is popular?
I think that what each presidential candidate is doing is saying that they will be the best person to bat for Ireland as a whole. Now, at the moment, you don't win presidential campaigns in Ireland by saying that, Ireland should have to repay all its money to the European Union. You don't become president of Ireland by saying, actually, the austerity measures that Ireland have introduced have been absolutely fine. What you've got to do is show some empathy with the Irish people who have been suffering from austerity measures, who've been suffering from the collapse of the banks in Ireland, who feel angry about the fact that many of those private people who invested in banks in Ireland will get a lot of their money back. In other words, it's ordinary people who've been losing. So you're better off in Ireland at the moment at being a left-of-centre candidate, I think, as president. That suits Michael Higgins because he's been president of the Labour Party since 2003, and he's seen as left of centre. It's also helped, to some extent, Martin McGuinness, because one of Martin McGuinness's chief pledges has been that he will only take the average industrial wage of an Irish worker and will give the rest of his presidential salary to the Irish people. And that plays very, very well with the Irish people. The problem for Martin McGuinness, of course, has been that he is to some extent tainted by his IRA background. But he wouldn't be the first former IRA commander to become president of Ireland.
If we broaden out this discussion to politics as a whole in Ireland, are there signs alternative and less mainstream ideas are gaining ground?
There have been protests beyond normal politics against the austerity measures in Ireland, but they've been fairly short-lived. There have been a couple of large-scale street demonstrations, but by and large, what has really happened is that the electorate has had, electoral contests take out their vengeance, and they took out their vengeance on the previous regime, the previous Fianna Fáil government, at the election earlier this year, by reducing that party to rubble, in effect. Now, if there hadn't been an election earlier this year, then I think that you probably would have seen more street protests. But the electorate was able to vent its anger in a constitutional and democratic and electoral arena, which has not been the case in some other countries. So things have remained, relatively peaceful, relatively calm, and there haven't been too many alternative forms of protest. The presidential contest will also be a chance for the people of Ireland to speak on their current debacle. That's not to say the people of Ireland aren't angry. They are. They are very angry indeed at the austerity measures that have been introduced. They feel that they are blameless. But they've been able to kick the party that they think was responsible for that, for presiding over that situation. They gave it the worst result in Ireland's election history. And to some extent that has taken, that has been the focus of protest. Let's kick the political party at the ballot box rather than take to the streets.
We've seen lots of protests in Greece, and many are asking what benefits Greece actually gets out of the Eurozone. Are people asking the same questions in Ireland?
Well, if you look at the opinion polls in Ireland, what was once a very pro-European Union country has become an anti-European Union country. That's the first thing to say. Public opinion has shifted dramatically. The blame has been shared between the European Union, the banks, and Fianna Fáil, the party that governed Ireland during that period. I think that the level of austerity that's been introduced in Ireland is very comparable to that that's being endured in Greece. And it's just simply been the nature of protests that has been different. But people in Ireland are very, very angry. I mean, there's been huge cuts. There's been cuts in public sector pay. There's been cuts in the minimum wage. There's been cuts in welfare benefits. Ireland has been treated every bit as severely as Greece. It's simply the nature of protest rather than the measures that are different. And, what you've seen in Ireland is a very, very radical reappraisal of its political system. The dominant party in Ireland, Fianna Fáil, dominated elections throughout the 20th century, now removed, now almost buried as a political entity. And I think, that's a dramatic change. The fact that you've not had, so many clashes on the streets doesn't mean to say there hasn't been a political upheaval. It's just been of a different nature.
Professor John Tonge joining me there from Liverpool. Stay tuned for more quality interviews and insights. Goodbye.